The haunting of a brilliant soul. The old house at the end of Willow Lane stood as a quiet monument to tragedy. Its grandeur had faded, and its once pristine white walls were now streaked with the grime of time. Inside, whispers of an unspeakable past lingered, making the air thick with unease. The story of Alina and the darkness that befell her was whispered in hushed tones throughout the town. No one dared approach the house, not after what had happened. Alina was a girl unlike any other. She was a beacon of talent and intelligence, a young woman whose every step seemed to outshine the world around her. Her charm and brilliance drew admiration from everyone who met her, everyone except her stepmother, Aisha. Aisha was a woman consumed by envy. Her own daughter, Mira, was everything Alina was not. Mira struggled academically, lacked grace, and paled in comparison to Alina's glowing presence. Every time someone praised Alina, Aisha's resentment grew. And when Alina's father, Jamil, began speaking of marrying her to the son of his wealthy friend, the jealousy turned into something far darker. The spark of envy. Jamil adored Alina. She was his pride, the child of his late wife, who had been just as remarkable. Aisha had initially accepted the role of stepmother with feigned kindness, but as time passed, her true feelings emerged. She saw Jamil's affection for Alina as a threat to her own influence over him, and a shadow cast over her daughter's life. "Why must you always talk about Alina?" Aisha snapped one evening as they sat in the dimly lit living room. "What about Mira? She's your daughter too." Jamil sighed. "Of course, Mira is my daughter. But you know as well as I do that Alina has a bright future. Mr. Farhan's son would be lucky to marry her. It's an opportunity we can't ignore." Aisha's jaw tightened. She forced a smile, but inside, a storm brewed. She would not allow her husband's admiration for Alina to overshadow her own daughter's future. That night, as she stared out of the bedroom window, a sinister idea began to take shape in her mind. The night of betrayal. It was a stormy evening when the plan unfolded. Thunder rumbled in the distance as the rain lashed against the windows. Alina sat in her room, engrossed in her books, her mind far removed from the darkness gathering around her. She didn't notice the way her stepmother watched her, nor the cold, calculating look in her eyes. "Alina," Aisha called sweetly, entering the room with a tray of tea. "You've been working so hard. Take a break, my dear." Alina looked up, surprised by the unusual kindness. She smiled softly and accepted the tea. "Thank you, Aisha." Aisha's smile didn't falter, even as she watched Alina take a sip. The tea was laced with a potent sedative, one that would ensure Alina couldn't fight back. Minutes later, Alina's vision blurred and she slumped over, unconscious. Aisha wasted no time. She carried Alina down to the basement, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. There, under the dim light of a single bulb, she committed the unthinkable. She staged it to look like a tragic accident, leaving Alina's lifeless body at the foot of the stairs. When Jamil returned home that night, the sight of his beloved daughter's body shattered him. The grief-stricken father believed Aisha's story of an unfortunate fall, never suspecting the darkness hidden behind her tears. The awakening of the spirit. But Alina's story did not end with her death. The injustice of her demise and the betrayal she suffered anchored her spirit to the house. At first, her presence was subtle, a faint whisper in the night, a shadow that flickered in the corner of a room. But as days turned into weeks, her anger grew, and with it, her power. The first signs were small but chilling. Jamil often found the books in Alina's study scattered across the floor as if tossed by unseen hands. Aisha's jewelry box would rattle in the night, its lid snapping open and closed with a force she couldn't explain. Mira's room became cold, no matter how many blankets she piled on. Aisha was the first to notice something was amiss. She would wake in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps outside her door. Mirrors in the house began to crack without explanation, and cold drafts swept through rooms, even on the warmest days. Mira, too, began to feel the presence. Her belongings would vanish, only to reappear in the most unsettling places. One night, Aisha awoke to find Alina standing at the foot of her bed. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow, but her expression burned with rage. "You thought you could silence me," Alina's voice echoed, distorted and otherworldly. "But I am still here," Aisha screamed, but when Jamil rushed into the room, there was no one there. He dismissed her fears as guilt and paranoia, but Aisha knew better. Alina's soul had returned, and it would not rest until justice was served. A family torn apart. As the hauntings grew more intense, the house descended into chaos. Objects flew across rooms, lights flickered uncontrollably, and Alina's laughter echoed through the halls. Mira became reclusive, terrified of the spirit that seemed to hold a grudge against her. "Why is this happening?" Mira sobbed one evening. "What does she want from us?" Aisha, her face pale and drawn, knew the answer, but couldn't bring herself to admit it. Instead, she tried to cleanse the house, bringing in priests and spiritual healers, but nothing worked. Alina's spirit was too strong, her anger too deep. Jamil, oblivious to the truth, grew increasingly frustrated. "This is madness," he said one night. "We need to move out of this house." But it was too late. The house had become a prison, and Alina's spirit would not let them leave so easily. Aisha began to unravel. She started hearing Alina's voice wherever she went, a constant reminder of her guilt. It whispered accusations, laughed mockingly, and sometimes screamed so loudly that Aisha would clutch her head in agony. The revelation won. Fateful night, Alina's spirit revealed the truth. Aisha was alone in the living room when the television flickered on, displaying images of the night Alina died. The grainy footage, impossible to exist, showed Aisha carrying Alina's limp body to the basement. Her crime was laid bare. "No," Aisha whispered, her voice trembling. "It wasn't supposed to end like this." Alina's voice filled the room. "You took everything from me. Now, I will take everything from you." The walls shook and the lights exploded, plunging the house into darkness. Aisha's screams echoed through the night as Alina's spirit finally exacted her revenge. The final act. As dawn broke, the house was eerily silent. When the neighbors finally worked up the courage to investigate, they found the house empty, its occupants gone. Some say Aisha and Mira fled in terror, while others believe Alina's spirit claimed them as her final act of vengeance. Jamil, heartbroken and alone, left the town, unable to face the memories of what had been lost. The house remains abandoned, a chilling reminder of the tragedy that unfolded within its walls. On quiet nights, passers-by claim to hear the faint sound of a girl's laughter carried on the wind. Alina's spirit lingers still, a brilliant soul that refuses to be forgotten. An eternal presence. Years later, rumors of the house attracted paranormal investigators and thrill-seekers. They documented strange phenomena, objects moving on their own, cold spots that defied explanation, and voices that seemed to emanate from the walls. One investigator claimed to see Alina's figure in a mirror, her eyes filled with sorrow and rage. The haunting became legend, a cautionary tale of envy and injustice. But for those who dared to enter, it was more than a story. It was a living nightmare, a testament to the power of a soul wronged. Alina's brilliance had been extinguished too soon, but her spirit burned brighter than ever, ensuring her legacy would never fade.